Hey YouTube, welcome back to Rampage Reviews. I'm Rampage, and this is Jedha! Sorry for the hype beginning there. I had to channel my inner, what's his name? Gerard Butler. But no, this is not Sparta. This is Jedha. This is the Battle of Jedha, the next High Republic book on the list for Rampage Reviews. This book takes place 382 years BBY. It's directly after the events of Convergence, the last book that we reviewed on the channel. I gotta say, it's a pretty decent book. Now, it's not gonna be a super fair review because I kind of knew this going in, but I didn't know that it's a script book. It's not a regular novel. So it's literally a script of I believe it was a radio show that was played. I would guess a performance, a stage performance, but it's played in an audiobook or in an audio setting. I will say, reading the book, I tried to envision it as a play, and it reads very much like a play. I can totally envision different things happening on stage, and the dialogue very much reminds me of the dialogue I would expect in an on-stage performance. Directly after Convergence, Eiram and E'ronoh, the two worlds that were at war with each other, but now they're trying to have some lasting peace between each other, are meeting on the planet Jedha. It's the holy world that is home to the Guardian of the Wills, which is a sect, a religious sect that's separate from the Jedi, and they're not necessarily Force sensitive. They worship the Force and the mysteries of the Force, and they believe the Force is a force of good that will guide you to a sort of enlightenment, much like a monk. There's one thing I want to correct from the last book, and I just want to address it right away because when I reviewed the last book, I was kind of harsh. I gave it a 5.8, Convergence. The book wasn't a terrible book. The problem I had with the book was that it just read kind of boring to me. And like I said during the last review, I read it as a standalone novel, as if these worlds had nothing to do with anything. When I looked ahead to some of the books that are coming up, I noticed that there's 3 books that take place in the same kind of time period of the High Republic that revolve around the relationship between Eiram and E'ronoh. And it seems like Eiram and E'ronoh are going to be a couple of worlds that are paid attention to a little bit more during this era, possibly with future projects. It seems like they will be of significance later on. That's what I deduced. So because of this, while reading this book, I was able to try to feel out the story as if what could happen next during this era, even though it has nothing to do with the Skywalker saga. And believe me, that's refreshing that we don't have to keep going back to that. But I was just looking for significance later, especially since it's a prequel to the prequels. You want it to have some kind of connection because it's what takes place 200 to 300 years before that time period. So you got to see, well, what happens here that is of significance that evolves into what happens later. That's really what you want to see. During that last book, Convergence, I didn't see anything that served to be an evolution into what could happen later during the prequels. That was my problem with it. I tried not to focus on that issue that I had with that last book and just read it as a saga of its own during this book. Given that, and I'll move on to what comes next in the story, 2 characters that took place in the last book, Creighton's son and Ada Forte, are coming back to this book. Creighton's son played a huge role in the last book. He was in most of the book with Char-Ryl-Roy, Enya Keen, and Gela Nadai, which were the 4 Jedi in the last book. Enya Keen does not come back in this book. Gela Nadai plays a small part in the book. She's mostly just communicates with Creighton's son and Ada Forte on Jedha. Ada Forte doesn't come into play in the last book until chapter 30, so you don't really hear much about her, but she's in the entire book in this one. And they're both serving as mediators, Creighton's son and Ada Forte, on Jedha between the ambassador from E'ronoh and the ambassador from Eiram. I shouldn't say they're not serving as mediators. They're to oversee the signing of this treaty. There is a mediator that was chosen for this. His name is Morton Santeca, and it's more of a symbolic role. Someone that can stand up and, I guess, kind of grandstand this relationship that they hope to continue with and move forward with peace between the worlds. While they're trying to meet for the first time to have this peace treaty signed, there's an explosion that happens, and right before the explosion, someone sees a ceremonial droid talking to another person. This is revealed, and the Jedi then have to investigate how this explosion happened. When the explosion happened, it killed Morton Santeca, so now your mediator is gone. Now you gotta find a new mediator, but in the meantime, they need to investigate the explosion, see who's responsible for it, why they do it, who stands to gain from E'ronoh and Eiram not signing a peace treaty between each other and staying at war. When they investigate and they ask everybody surrounding the room, they discover that everybody saw someone different. Eiram saw somebody from E'ronoh, E'ronoh saw someone from Eiram, Path of the Open Hand saw a Jedi. Oh yeah, they take place in the book too, sorry. Just everyone seemed to see someone different. You find out later why. That's what happens at this point of the book. They don't really get anywhere with their investigation, but they do have to kind of move forward and see how they can move forward with the treaty signing. So the delegation on Jedha, who I believe is also people who were assigned to oversee this treaty or organize the treaty, they decide to choose Tilson Graf, who is suggested by one of the ambassadors, the ambassador from Eiram, Ambassador Sirox, I think his name, or Ciro. He's reluctantly chosen because apparently the Graf family in the universe is a bit of an infamous family. They're not a family of prominence for good reasons. And that's just a few of the family members. Tilson Graf is able to convince the panel that, hey, don't throw me into the mud just because my name has been sullied by some bad actors. Our family still has good history elsewhere, and I am well qualified to serve as a mediator to this peace treaty. My symbolic role will still be of positive significance. The panel agrees reluctantly, chooses him as the mediator. They try to move forward with another treaty signing, but before they can, a couple more explosions happen. So people are now starting to be like, what's going on? Why are there so many explosions happening? The Jedi still have to investigate this. What's good? Like, they think maybe the Path of the Open Hand had a hand in it because they also don't like the Jedi, you find out. This is another thing that I got wrong in the last review. Because of how I felt the book was boring, the last book, it was hard for me to detect what were the agendas and goals and character significance of the different groups and people of the last book. And one of those groups is the Path of the Open Hand. There is one phrase they kept uttering in the last book that they do utter a lot in this book, and that's the shouting through the streets, the Force will be free. That's what they always want to say. And they say that because they don't believe people should manipulate the Force. Like when Jedi and Sith manipulate the Force to take action, they believe this causes an imbalance in the Force and that something else will react to that and try to balance the Force back. Such as if you save someone's life, they think someone else will be killed in response. If you save several lives, several other lives will be killed in response. That's what they believe to be true. The Jedi are constantly trying to argue this point throughout the book and explain to them that that's not how the Force works, like Han Solo so famously said in The Force Awakens. While they're discovering these other two explosions, and actually while they're also investigating the first explosion, there's another Jedi that makes an appearance. Her name is Salandra Sho. She's performing a pilgrimage at Jedha, which is something a lot of Jedi do to visit the Holy Planet or the Holy City, try to make more sense of their purpose in the Force and what they can do to contribute to the universe. Rather than continue on that pilgrimage, she gets dragged into this investigation. Creighton half asks, half doesn't ask, but she senses that, hey, obviously I was sent here for a reason. It feels like the Force brought me here to help you with this investigation. So she agrees to go help them discover who's responsible. While they were investigating the first explosion, after Morton Santeca died and before Tilson Graf was named the new mediator, there was a ceremonial droid that was seen talking to someone, like I said before. So there's another person in the book, his name is Keth Sarapath. He is a member of the Church of the Force, which is another sect, kind of like the Guardian of the Wills, except they're not really protectors of anything. The Guardian of the Wills protect the kyber crystals that exist on Jedha. The Church of the Force is literally just a church that seeks to uncover the mysteries of the Force in a spiritual sense. I wouldn't say it's so much different than, say, different branches of Christianity. You might kind of compare it to that. So that's kind of what the Church of the Force is all about. So Keth Sarapath was actually assigned as the assistant to Morton Santeca before he was died. So the first explosion happens, Morton Santeca dies. They know a droid was involved. Keth Sarapath owns a ceremonial droid from the Church of the Force, no less. So then they begin to think maybe that droid was responsible. Well, the droid survived the blast, and they know that the droid that was responsible or was part of it didn't survive the blast. So now they realize, okay, well, he wasn't responsible for it. So now they're still investigating. Two other explosions happen, like I said before. Now things are starting to get uneasy. People are like, why are these explosions happening? What's going on? The Path of the Open Hand is out talking to people saying, hey, maybe the Jedi are responsible because they manipulate the Force and the Force shall be free. And, you know, E'ronoh keeps trying to blame Eiram and Eiram is trying to blame E'ronoh. But all the while, the ambassadors are still they're trying their best to see how can we move forward with the treaty while they're still kind of skeptical of each other. So things are starting to divide a bit here. Now, during the last attempt to sign the treaty, the herald of the Path of the Open Hand, that's what he calls himself, is outside and he's gathering a group of people, you might call it a mob of people, that are starting to riot. And he's getting a rise out of these people to try to turn them against the Jedi because they believe that the Jedi is responsible for these explosions because of how they manipulate the Force. So things start to unravel here. The people are starting to lose control. The people inside the second spire chamber, which is where they're signing the treaty, are starting to get uneasy because they hear people getting louder outside. Then there's fighting that breaks out outside. Solandra Sho is outside and sees the fighting taking place, trying to get everybody to calm down, basically. During this fighting, there's a monster that's released that the Path of the Open Hand owns, and this is the mother of the Path of the Open Hand, who makes an appearance in the last book too, is still the leader. She releases a monster called the Leveler. The Leveler, apparently, we don't know much about it, but it can make a Jedi or someone who's attuned to the Force lose their connection temporarily, or maybe while it's around the monster, and become somewhat disoriented. This happens to Solandra Sho. We don't know much else about how that happens or what the monster can do, what else it can do, but we do know, and we don't really know much about what it looks like. We just know that it's big and scary from what I read, but it is on the loose and now it's gone. Solandra Sho is left there trying to figure out what just happened. Now all these people are fighting, and now we got to try to figure out how to calm everybody down and get this treaty signed. Well, now while everybody's fighting, someone drives a speeder into the second spire chamber and takes out Ambassador Tintak, who's the ambassador to E'ronoh. So he's dead, but this speeder also takes out a bunch of other people. The ambassador from Eiram, Ambassador Siro, starts saying, "Oh, the person's wearing E'ronoh clothes. It's someone from the E'ronoh army." And the people from E'ronoh are thinking it's someone with Eiram clothes. You know, everybody thinks it's each other. So then now the peace is stopped, the ceasefire is stopped, and everybody starts fighting each other. So literally throughout the rest of the book, there's chaos, fighting. I'm not going to go into a lot of details about the fighting. At different instances, the Path of the Open Hand is trying to heal people, or at least appear as if they're trying to heal people. I think they're just doing it for appearances. They're not really healing anybody. They're kind of just setting them down and saying, okay, well, you'll be one with the Force soon, so I'll make you comfortable. Like, not actually healing them or anything like that. So the Jedi are trying to protect the citizens of Jedha in the streets. So they start to fight the droids that Eiram releases to fight the E'ronoh army, and they're trying to take out these droids so that way they don't hurt anybody else in the street. People from E'ronoh and people from Eiram are fighting each other. The Jedi are also trying to protect themselves because there's people trying to attack them since the Path started turning people against them. So they're trying to investigate how this happened, protect themselves, protect the people on the street. It's just a lot of craziness going on. This is the battle right now. Later on, you find out that there is a leader of another sect on Jedha called the Brotherhood of the Ninth Door, or the Brothers of the Ninth Door. These people are kind of like the Path, except they're geared towards the dark side, and they are actually able to use the dark side to conceal themselves, and not only conceal themselves, but really make other people see someone else there than who is really there. This explains why everyone saw someone different talking to the ceremonial droid during the first blast. So now the Jedi realize, oh, it's got to be someone from the Brothers of the Ninth Door. So there's a leader of this brotherhood named Mytion, M-Y-T-I-O-N, or I believe, yeah, Mytion, yeah, or Mytion. He's got this weird voice. It's described that when he speaks, it sounds like there's 3 separate voices, high, middle, and low, talking at the same time. You know, I think we kind of know what that resembles in some cases. Upon trying to search for possible aggressors for this battle, Ada Forte runs into Mytion. They begin to fight, and Mytion is against the Jedi, obviously, because they are geared towards the dark side. The Brotherhood is. They're fighting each other. Ada finds out from him that he was hired by Tilson Graff. Ada then realizes, wow, there's a lot of political influence here at work. People really want these two worlds to fight. I guess that you might compare it to feeding the military-industrial complex or something like that. People stand to benefit from people fighting. That's kind of the notion they're trying to set here. Mytion almost takes her out, but then Keth comes out of nowhere, is able to stab Mytion with, with Ada's lightsaber, because she kind of loses it for a second. Then Mytion turns around and stabs Keth, and then they kill each other. Ada has to then report that back to everyone else on the surface. They were down below in the spire somewhere. So they get up there. People are still fighting. At one point, the E'ronoh army and the Eiram army are about to shoot at each other, and when they do, the Jedi like stop and they like freeze the lasers in the middle of the air. And Creighton's son makes a huge speech to get them to stop fighting. So then the soldiers there stop fighting and they evacuate because they were moved by his speech and needed to take off at that moment. The mother of the path is seen talking to Tilson Graff. Tilson Graff is like, I need to get out of here. And the mother's trying to get out of there too. And the mother's like, no, I'm not gonna take you out. And then Tilson's like, well, I mean, you need to, because otherwise I might start telling people about our relationship. So then the mother's like, oh, okay. And then just shoots him right there in cold blood on the street. So he's gone. She takes off. Nobody can really connect the path to what happened, even though you kind of figure out that the mother was the one who spurred all of this along. And it really came out of her hatred of the Jedi, or the path's hatred of the Jedi. They don't like the Jedi. The E'ronoh army and the Eiram army evacuate Jedha. The ceasefire is still gone. They are now at war with each other, but the battle has ended, so they've left the planet. The Jedi, they actually got reinforcements to come in from the Republic, along with some Republic troops. I don't know what those are called. They're obviously not clones, but we don't know what kind. I assumed that the Republic didn't have an army at this point, but I guess they would have to. I mean, it's still 400 years BBY, so yeah, I'm sure I guess that they had an army at that point. So they came in, the fighting has stopped. Recap: the mother took off. The Jedi took off back to the Republic. Eiram and E'ronoh have left the planet. Brothers of the Ninth Door, I don't think they've been destroyed, but their leader was. So they've gone back into hiding, I suppose. They're from Jedha, so they didn't leave Jedha. They're still staying on Jedha. Just like the path is not from Jedha. I think they take hold in different planets in the Outer Rim. So, but that ceases the battle. The battle is now over. What did I think about the book? Well, like I said, it's not really fair for me to judge it because it's not a novel, it's a script. And I try to read it as such, and how people would react to each other on stage, and like how the dialogue would read on stage. That's how I kind of had to read it. And it was interesting. Like, it's not fair, but it felt like I was reading like a story about the Power Rangers, like helping like people fight, because just, you know, there was corny dialogue, and, you know, in plays there's corny dialogue. That's a normal thing. You know, and you're there, it's live, so then, yeah, it's still fun and interesting and kind of charming in a way, and you enjoy it still, even though you know it's corny humor and corny dialogue, but you still enjoy it, and you enjoy the novelty of what you're watching. It'd be a Star Wars play, so sure, okay, it's Star Wars, I enjoy it because it's Star Wars. You know, stuff like that. All in all, it read kind of kooky, the dialogue did. You were constantly reminded about what was going on, and I feel like that is something else that happens on stage plays. Whenever different dialogue happens, like they keep having to repeat where everybody is, what's happening, and it helps you keep connected to the story. So that, I mean, I guess that helped the reader out. I didn't know what was going on. So that was nice, but there was just not a lot of subtlety to it. It was an interesting anecdote in Star Wars history. That's what I'll say. Different players of the game. I'm only going to name a few. There's like tons in the list here. The main players, Creighton's son and Ada Forte, they take place throughout the whole book. They're there on Jedha to oversee the treaty signing. They're great. I mean, they obviously they were respectable fighters in the book. They helped protect the people of Jedha. But again, and this is probably just indicative of Jedi during that time, they're not colorful in any way. Like I mean, I shouldn't say that. They're kind of colorful. There's some edge to them, I guess, a little bit. Not any more so that made them super intriguing. Their character was very gray, a little bland, and it probably didn't need to be any more than that, just because of what was going on. It was a big event that took place, so you really just needed to know the plot and how things unfolded. It was less about the spiciness of the characters and more about how the events unfolded, which I can understand. That's fair. Their characters were slightly bland. Maitian, also the Brothers of the Ninth Door, he was, I mean, like a very stereotypical villain. The mother was probably the most interesting one because she's a villain, but she's also like got this like righteous motive that she really believes in, kind of like a Thanos type character, you know, like insane, but has this humanistic agenda that you kind of like, oh yeah, I kind of get what they're trying to do here, but then they go to bad means to take on that agenda. The Herald is this outspoken Path of the Open Hand leader. He was fine, you know, nothing exciting. Gelenata, you don't really see her that much, like I said. Tilson Graff was interesting. He was the second mediator of he is a member of the prominent family, the Graff family, and he was fine. He was just sketchy, just a sketchy guy that they picked to lead or picked to mediate this peace treaty. And Morton Santek, I didn't really get to see much of him, but he was part of a prominent family that wasn't as infamous as Tilson Graff, so he was fine. Not an exciting character either. But many of the characters in the book weren't super exciting, and that's kind of the gist of what I'm getting throughout the High Republic right now. Is I haven't ran into any super exciting characters. Like Axel Greylark in the last book was the most exciting character in that book. He was pretty cool. There were no Axel Greylarks in this book. Not that I could tell. Yeah, that's a rundown of the characters. Can it mesh with Legends? Yeah, it could. It takes place right after the last book. It could. Nothing in it really suggested to me that it was going to clash with anything else in Legends, or hard to tell about anything later on, really. It just takes place very far apart from everything, so you could loophole many things in this book. And again, no Sith take place, so the Sith being extinct, or so the Jedi or the Republic think, for over a millennia, that still is intact. People are not privy to any Sith existing during this time. So a rating, man, I almost don't want to give it a rating, just because, like I said, it's not a novel, it's a script book. But given that, and trying to like give it a rating of what would I think about the on-stage performance? I kind of think about that too. I think I'll give it I'm like 6.8 with it. It is better than the last book, just because it was much easier to follow. I always knew what was going on, and it seemed more of a climax to the last book. The last book was more about, hey, let's love each other and try to like not fight so much. And this book was that, but then this just crazy conflict comes into play, and that just felt like more of a punch that was easier to grapple onto. So yeah, that's kind of how I feel about it. I appreciate every one of you that stopped by to watch my videos. Hopefully we can get up to maybe 20, 30, 40 views and just keep growing from there. So appreciate all of you. If you enjoyed the content that you watched today, make sure to like the video, subscribe to my channel, and come back for the next video as well. If you wanted to read this book or purchase this book, there will be a link in the description. Be aware that that is an Amazon link, and I am an Amazon affiliate, and if you use that link to purchase the book, it will support the channel in some way or form. But don't purchase the book because you want to support the channel. Purchase it because you want to talk about Star Wars with me or anybody else that's involved in the channel. Or you can follow my Twitter at Rampage Tweets, which is also described in the description. So I want to talk about more about the content that happens in Star Wars and the High Republic and Legends and Canon, everything. We want to talk about everything and just talk about how everything kind of meshes together, or if it doesn't mesh and what conflicts. Thank you again for stopping by. May the Force be with you, and have a great day.